Hey y'all, Lindsay Lyman here with the Felt Flower Academy. Today I want to talk to you about the 5 different ways you can cut fabric, felt, pretty much just about any material that you want to craft with. And I'm going to teach you a little bit of what are some of the pros and cons and which option might be best for you depending upon what you want to do. Now, that being said, if it works for you, awesome. There's no right or wrong way to cut the material that you're trying to use. There's just a few tips that might help you get a different end result if that's what you're going for. So the first option that I do probably half the time is old-fashioned with your hands and some scissors. I just cut it freehand. I don't actually use a template. I do this a lot with leaves and different elements that I don't need an exact precise shape for the actual creation I'm doing. Because if you also think about flowers and nature, they are not exact. Every piece is different. And so sometimes I like the different nature of that. Now, one tip to keep in mind when you are cutting things by hand is I tend to over or underestimate the size of the finished thing I'm freehanding. So what I like to do is take a piece of felt like this and cut it into about the size that I want the finished shape to be. So what this will allow me to do is to know, okay, I need to cut kind of close towards the edges if this is the size I want it to be. Another thing you could do is freehand one piece that you want and get it as perfect as you can. So let's say you want to do this, and then you can almost use that as a template and lay it on your felt and just cut around it. And don't forget, I'm going to fold this in half. You can cut felt more than one layer at a time. Cut multiple layers and save yourselves a little bit of time there. The second option to cutting felt or your materials to craft with is what I call the freezer paper method. This is what you would use if you have a template that you're trying to follow a specific pattern and you're going to cut it by hand. Okay, so what you want to do is get some freezer paper and you want to get the pattern onto that freezer paper. If you're in the academy, go to the foundational videos and I walk you through how to do this step by step. But high level, you could cut out freezer paper and feed it through your printer if you want. But let me tell you, I can do hard things. I can't do easy things. Every time I've tried to print it on my printer, it jams and it gets stuck and I get annoyed and frustrated. So what I do is if I have a pattern or a template I want, and I'm going to hand cut it using the freezer paper method, I will print it out on regular paper and then I will put that underneath the freezer paper and trace the pattern onto the freezer paper. Okay. Because what we're going to do is we're going to take that freezer paper and we're going to take a hot, dry iron, no steam, no water, and you put that right on top of your felt, and then you're going to iron over it for a little bit and give it some good pressure and let it really heat up. What it's doing is the back of freezer paper is a little bit waxy. We're melting that and it's sticking to the felt. So now you have your template attached to your felt. So you're going to cut through the felt and the freezer paper and cut the shape out. You want to tear the freezer paper off when you're done and you have your perfect shape that you were able to cut by hand. Now, fair warning, if you're using the freezer paper method, do not leave it on there like overnight. You want to do this all in about the same day because the longer you leave the freezer paper attached to the felt, the more stickier it gets. So as you pull it off, what it'll do is it'll start to pull some of the fibers out of the felt, which if you want that end look, awesome. That's just usually not the look that I'm going for. The next way that you could cut felt is the other way, besides cutting it freeform by hand, that I use quite often is using a die cut. So this is an example of a die. You can see it has the shape here. This is a wooden die. This is the shape that it is. And what these are like little blades, like little scissors. Think of it as almost like a cookie cutter. When you have a cookie cutter, you put it on top of the dough and you put a little pressure on it and it cuts that shape in the dough. Same concept here, but this is using a lot of pressure to cut it. So when I use this die, I can put 5 or 6 layers of felt and I put a piece of plastic on top of it and I run that whole piece through a die cutting machine that I crank by hand and it applies a lot of pressure and it cuts out the exact shape I want from the felt. Okay. I love this option because it gives me the exact shape that I want. It's so much faster. I can cut out multiple pieces at a time. And I love that my die cutter does not have any electronic components. Very popular die cutters are Sizzix, and those work great. I personally have an AccuQuilt. Those are actually targeted towards quilters, but I don't quilt. I use it for flowers. But I've also bought attachments and things that I can use the AccuQuilt for Sizzix dies, AccuQuilt dies, AccuCut dies, and even like no-name dies that I buy from international suppliers. So if you're in the academy, I'm going to do a deep dive and teach you and show you all that stuff and answer your questions on our monthly workshop. But die cutting machines are great. They save you a lot of time. Again, I love that they don't have electronic components because felt is very fibrous, and those little fibers with electronics do not mix well. The downside to it is you need to find the right shape that you want in a die. In the academy, I'm also going to show you how you customize dies and teach you some places where you can actually get custom dies made if you really want to go that route. But I love my die cutter. I got it, 8-9 years ago. And truthfully, it should last me for life. It's a great option if you like to craft and want a faster way to cut out a lot of shapes. The next option is to use an electronic cutter. Cricut is kind of the most popular version of these. And truth be told, this is where I started. As someone who loves to craft, someone gifted me a Cricut and it was so nice and fun. And I had a lot of fun with it. But I will also be honest, I actually have a technology degree and I worked in big tech for about 12 years. So I can handle my own around technology. And the user interface was not great. Things that should have been simple and easy were not. And it was pretty frustrating to use the software and the machine itself. What I found is it worked best for paper. But with felt, what happens is you have to stick it to something sticky that you're going to feed through the machine. And then it works like a printer, but instead of printing ink, it has a little blade and cuts out the shape. And so if it's not sticky enough, it won't work. And if your blade isn't sharp enough, it won't work. And I just found with felt, I kept running into so many problems. It was so much faster for me to cut it by hand, either with the freezer paper or just freehand, that I kind of stopped using it altogether. But again, do what works best for you. There are more shape options and you have more options to customize it with something like a Cricut, but it's going to take a little bit more of a learning curve from the technology side and to buy one as an investment as well. And then the last way to cut felt is with a laser cutter. You can basically cut anything with a laser. You just have to have the right settings and the right material underneath it. It might take some figuring out, but that is a great option as well. I personally haven't done a lot of cutting with a laser. My brother has one, and one of these days I'm going to go over to his house and play with it. But they are a little bit of an investment to get into, and you've got to make sure you have the right settings. What I've seen with other felt florists that use lasers, unless you're cutting out dozens and dozens of shapes from the same material, it is an option, but it's not necessarily faster than cutting it by hand using the freezer paper method or even the die cutting option. So whichever option works best for you, that's the one I think you should go with. But there are multiple different ways to cut the different material you're trying to craft with. So leave a comment below. Let me know, did I miss any? And what is your favorite way to cut felt? All right, keep crafting. Leave any questions you have below. Make sure to subscribe below. Every week I'm going to give you some new crafting tips. You got this. We'll talk soon.